We'll begin with our traditional beginning that I sometimes remember. When the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov saw a misfortune threatening the world, it was his custom to go into a certain part of the forest to meditate. There he would light a fire, say a special prayer, and the miracle would be accomplished and the misfortune averted. Later, when his disciple, the celebrated Maggid of Mezrich, had occasion for the same reason to intercede with heaven, he would go to the same place in the forest and say, "Master of the universe, listen. I do not know how to light the fire, but I'm still able to say the prayer." And again, the miracle would be accomplished. Still later, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov, in order to save his people once more, would go into the forest and say, "I do not know how to light the fire. I do not know the prayer, but I know the place. This must be sufficient." And it was sufficient, and the miracle was accomplished. Then it fell to Rabbi Israel of Rizhin to overcome misfortune. Sitting in his armchair, his head in his hands, he spoke to God. "I'm unable to light the fire, and I do not know the prayer, and I cannot even find the place in the forest. All I can do is to tell the story, and this must be sufficient." And it was sufficient. So, telling the story, of course, is a central part of Pesach. So we've been telling stories now for quite a while. And for today, let's see what happens with the following story. I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll begin. Okay, this is a story from Eldad Hadani, Eldad the Danite. So it's over 1,000 years old. There was a person named Eldad who claimed to come from the tribe of Dan. That's why it's called the Danite, Eldad Hadani. And he told about tribes of Israel that existed in far off places that were isolated from the rest of the Jewish people. And they were stuck there, but one day we would all be reunited. So this is a story about the tribe of Dan and other tribes connected with the tribe of Dan. Okay, so we're starting with our rabbis. Tell, who would like to read for us today? Going once, going twice. Okay, nobody's gonna read. Oh, well. All right, Carney, you gotta unmute though.
All right, our rabbis tell. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rose and fashioned 2 gold calves and caused Israel to sin, and the kingdom of the house of David was divided, he gathered 10 tribes of Israel together and said to them, "Go forth and do battle with Rehoboam and with the inhabitants of Jerusalem." "Shall we wage war," they said to him, "with our brothers, the offspring of our Lord David, king of Israel and Judah?" And the elders of Israel came up to him and said, "In the whole of Israel we have no warriors and men of war to compare with the tribe of Dan. Command them to wage war against Judah."
Okay, so this is a story about the splitting of the kingdoms, the southern kingdom from the northern kingdom, the Judah and Benjamin in the south, and the 10 tribes in the north. Rechavam was the son of Solomon, and Jeroboam was the son, was a rebel. He's the one who led the forces that broke away from the southern kingdom. So that's our setting here. By the way, when we read in the Haftorahs for Pesach, just to give it away, at the end of the time of the 10 tribes were exiled by the Assyrians in 722 BCE. So they stopped existing long before The southern tribes were exiled in 586 BCE. And then, of course, the southern tribes continued to exist and the 10 tribes disappeared. But one of the things that Yeravam was noted for was preventing people from the northern kingdom to come down to celebrate the Passover in Jerusalem. So there's a little bit of a Passover connection here. Okay. Anyway, so they say go to talk to Dan. Dan can be the fighters.
Continue.
Yeah, please.
Thereupon Jeroboam said to them, "Sons of Dan, go forth and wage war against Judah and Benjamin. By the life of our father Dan," said they to him, "we shall not wage war against our brothers, and we shall not shed their blood when there is no reason." And thereupon the sons of Dan took swords and bows and arrows and spears and dedicated themselves to wage war against Jeroboam until the Lord saved them from shedding the blood of their brothers. Then they sent a proclamation through the whole tribe of Dan, saying, "Sons of Dan, flee and depart from the land of Israel, and let us go to Egypt." For they planned to destroy the land of Egypt and slay all its inhabitants. But their princes said to them, "Where will you go? Why, it is already written in the Torah, you shall not see them again forever."
Right. So this is what God says that after the Exodus and after the splitting of the Red Sea, on the seventh day of Passover, God says, the way you see the Egyptians today running after you and then drowning in the Red Sea, you'll never see them again. And the tradition said that means we should never go back down to Egypt ever again. So the Danites are now running away from Yeravam, who wants to attack them because they are rebelling against his authority. And they decide to go down to Egypt, but their princes say, wait, you can't do that. Okay.
Then they considered going to Moab and Ammon, but when they found written in the Torah that Holy and Blessed One had restrained Israel from inheriting their border, the Holy and Blessed One gave them a good inspiration. The sons of Dan went up to the river Kishon, riding their camels until they reached the river of Cush. There they found a fat, good, and spacious land, fields and vineyards, gardens and orchards. Nor did the inhabitants of the land prevent the children of Israel from dwelling together with them, but made an alliance with them. So the men of Cush used to pay them a tax and dwelt together with them for many years until they increased and multiplied exceedingly. Then, after the death of Sennacherib, 3 tribes of Israel.
So that's Sennacherib.
Sennacherib.
Right? Sennacherib, right? That's the Assyrian ruler who exiled the 10 lost tribes. Go ahead.
Sennacherib, 3 tribes of Israel journeyed to join them, these being Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. They journeyed and encamped until they reached the borders of the men of Dan, where each of the tribes slew men of Cush for 3 months of the year and took the spoils for his own tribe. The 4 tribes, which are Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, have set up their camps in Havilah the Ancient, where the gold is. These are fine places that are to be found in the kingdom of Parvaim, under the rule of Horinus. They trust in their maker first, and God is their aid.
Okay, so Havilah is a biblical name of an area where the gold is, as it says, but nobody knows where that place is. So this legend is now placing these 4 tribes who had disappeared, of course, with the exile of the 10 tribes, putting them now into a place where they're thriving. There's gold, it's like the golden Medina. This is the original golden Medina, the original golden state that America was supposed to be. Of course, the gold is all over the place. They live, in luxury and abundance. And of course, they rule over the local inhabitants without any problems. And they also remain loyal to God. Okay, so here we go. And
they trust in their maker first, and God is their aid. And these tribes have set their hands on the necks of their foes. Year after year, they make war with 7 kingdoms and 7 lands, and these lie beyond the river of Cush. And these 4 tribes have gold and silver and precious stones and flocks and herds and camels and asses, an exceedingly vast number. And they sow and reap, though they dwell in tents. When they desire, they set out and encamp in their tents from border to border for 2 days' journey on 2 different seas. Where they will encamp, you will not find room to place even a single human foot.
So what do you make of this statement here, that they sow and reap though they dwell in tents? What's that all about?
They're farmers,
Right?
but usually farmers don't live in tents. They live just on the land.
Right. Who lives in tents?
Nomads.
Nomads, right? So and when they desire, they set out and camp in their tents from border to border, 2 days journey. They go wherever they want. And at the same time, they're also farmers. So farmers set up villages, they set up houses, they set up their farms, they dwell on the land, and they don't move around. But these, they have it all. They have their matzah and eat it too, right? So, yeah. And they're so numerous that wherever they are, they're so crowded that there's no room for anybody to move around.
The name of their king,
Go ahead.
king is Uziel, while the name of their great prince is Elizaphan, of the children of Elizaphan, of the sons of
Oholiab.
Aholiab of the tribe of Dan.
Okay, so these names are meaningful names. First of all, Oholiab is the name that we came across already a few weeks ago in the construction of the Mishkan. He was Bezalel's assistant. So that's him. So Oholiab means that my father is my tent, right? And of course, the tent of meeting is the shelter. That's the tent that's God's home. So my father, with a capital F, that's who makes gives me shelter and gives me my tent and gives me the place that's a sanctuary. So they are the children of Elitzaphan. Elitzaphan means my God who hid me away. And of course, these are the hidden tribes. These are the tribes that nobody knows where they are because God is taking care of them and placed them off into some, God unforsaken place to take care of them, but they're hidden from everybody else. And the name of their king is Uziel. Uziel means God is my strength. God is my might, right? So these are mighty warriors, but they derive their real strength from their connection to God. And of course, that's what we're going to read now, the flag. Go ahead.
His flag is white, on which is written in black, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And when he wishes to go forth to war, the herald sounds the ram's horn, and the captain of the army comes, and the forces set out with 120,000 little white flags. Every 3 months, another tribe sets out to war, and the tribe remains without. And whatever spoils they take from their foes, they divide within their own tribe. This they do until the completion of the 3 months, when they come back and bring all the spoils to King Uziel, who shares it with all Israel. For this is their law from King David to this day. And King Uziel takes his own portion and gives it to all the sages who are versed in the Torah and are tent dwellers.
Okay, so the word here, tent dwellers, comes from the description of Jacob. Esau was the one who would go out to war or go out into the field and hunt with his bow and arrow. He was the man of violence. But Jacob was the tent dweller, Yoshev Ohalim, which the rabbis understood to mean he's the homebody. He's the one who sits with the books. He studies Torah all day long. What are we making of the picture that we have of these tribes of Israel? What kind of characteristics are they notable for?
They're violent.
Yeah, go ahead.
They're marauders.
Well, they're ready to fight, and they're constantly able to take care of battles, and they take turns, right? There are 4 of these tribes conveniently. So every 3 months, another tribe is on duty to go out and do war. and they're they're out there running around taking spoils, but they also have sages. They also have people who stay back and sit in the tent. So again, it's another example of having their matzah and eating it too. Hold on a second here. 1 second, I'm sorry. Hello. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I ask a
Good.
question?
Sure.
In the beginning, the first tribe, I believe, was the tribe of Dan, who came to this area, and it said, the people said, okay, you can live here, just pay us a tax. And it sounded like they had a peaceful,
They paid Don a tax.
oh, they paid Don, the local people?
Right. They
Ah.
bowed to Don's authority,
Oh,
and they willingly subjugated themselves to Don.
but
This
that
is like,
sounded like a peaceful arrangement, and now
right.
these other tribes are
And
very warlike.
well, they're all very good at making war, right? That was why Don got in trouble, because they were recognized as the most warlike tribe, but they refused to fight against their own people, right? They refused to fight against the other Israelites. So then they got in trouble with their rebel king, Yeravam, who wanted to have a civil war. So they had to run away because they didn't want to fight. If they would have fought, then who knows? They would have, maybe been victorious, but they didn't want to shed Jewish blood. So they ran away, and they are fearsome, and they're imposing, and they take over without any problems in this new land, right? So this is a fantasy of, like benign colonialism, right? That they're the people, the natives are happy to welcome you. Everybody's living together in peace. It's all great. Then, hundreds of years later, when the kingdom of the northern kingdom is falling apart, then these three other tribes come and join with Dan, but they are now all united in fighting against whatever enemies they have, because there are other enemies. They're not the Israelites that they're fighting against, but they're fighting against other peoples, right? Now they couldn't fight against the Ammon and Moab people, because that was also, the Bible says, don't fight with them. And they weren't allowed to go down to Egypt, so they had to be in this other place. And then what the story is basically assuming is, when's the last time you opened the paper and you didn't see that people were fighting with each other? Right? The war is the constant, and that's part of what we're taking, we should be taking note of, is this story is being told to the Jewish people that we are familiar with, right? The Jewish people that are living in Europe, and in mostly in the Mediterranean basin, right? And they are, for the most part, subjects to other authorities. So this story is about these fierce, unbelievable Jewish warriors who are completely independent. They don't take anything from anybody. They're out there, doing successfully taking on every foe, right? And also still constantly studying Torah and being loyal to God. So this is the image that is being told to the subject peoples of the Jewish faith that we're familiar with. Okay, so yes, we did all of this. As for
The sons of Samson, who are of the tribe of Dan, they surpass them all. They do not flee in any circumstances in war, for this would be a great shame for them. And they are now like the sand of the sea for multitude, and have no occupation other than war. And when they go a-warring, they say, it is not good for a man to flee. Let the young man perish rather than flee. Let him be strong at heart with the Lord. Then they repeat several times, and all of them cry together, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Okay, so here we have, did anybody know that Samson had children? No. So
No.
here you have it. The sons of Samson are the fiercest of the fierce, and they will never run away, and they will fight to the death. And they go out there into battle with Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, the Shema Yisrael. Now,
They almost sound like mercenaries.
they're not mercenaries because
No,
nobody
no.
else is paying. A mercenary is a soldier for hire.
Mm.
They're on their own. They are their own tribe. Now, a little earlier, actually, historically speaking, the Eldad the Danite, we don't know if he really was a real person, and certainly all of these legends that he told are legendary stories that are fantasies rather than realities. But we know from the rise of Islam that in the Arabian Peninsula, in the 7th century CE, a few hundred years before this, a couple of hundred years before this, these stories start circulating, there are very, very fierce Jewish tribes that are, in control of a certain area within the Arabian Peninsula. And when Muhammad starts his campaign to, to impose Islam in the region, this is one of the major things that happens, is his battles with the Jewish tribes. And he finally, it's a whole story, go look it up. But they are well known as being fierce warriors, as being really, really, a challenge. And how Muhammad defeats them is a whole, like I say, a story we're not going to go into right now. But they get wiped out by the first generation of Islamic fighters. And these independent Jewish little sheikdoms disappear. But they have real, real roots in reality. So to a certain extent, this story harkens back to this idea of the fierce Jew that stands up for himself, doesn't take guff from anybody, protects his own land, is willing to fight anybody that challenges him. And we have this, as I say, the end, Hear, O Israel. When we think about Hear, O Israel, when we think about the Shema Yisrael, in our concept of traditional Jewish history, obviously we're supposed to say the Shema every day, but when is a person saying the Shema besides the regular ritual recitation of the Shema? When does a person, specifically recite the Shema in some hour of unique
When they're dying.
need?
When
What?
they're dying. When they're dying.
Right, when they're dying or when they're being led to death, right? When they are being oppressed. So either when you're dying, you're on your deathbed, if you're able to collect yourself consciously to say the Shema, I give my soul back to God, you're the one, I love God, this is the first paragraph of the Shema. But also even when people were being led to to their death by their murderers and oppressors, they would say, we don't care, we're going to still affirm God's oneness, you're not going to make us give up our belief in God. Here, it's a battle cry. Here, yes, they might die, but really what they're doing is they're rallying themselves. Let us be strong at heart with God. We're gonna just go out there and fight as much as we can. So this is, a little bit of a very different kind of picture of an exiled Jewish people. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
And Eldad the Danites relates, there are 4 tribes in one place, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The name of this place is Havilah, the ancient, where the gold is. They have a judge named Abdon, and they impose the traditional 4 death penalties of the courts. And they dwell in tents and in camp and strike camp
Okay.
and travel from place to place. They wage war with the 7 kings of Cush. To travel through their land takes 7 months, but 5 of those kings surround them from the rear and either side and wage war with them at all times. If anybody's tender-hearted, they give him to the inheritance of the Lord. They have the whole of Scripture, but do not recite the scroll of the story of Esther, because they were not affected by that miracle. Nor do they recite the scroll of Lamentations, so that they should not break their hearts. And in all their Talmud, they make no mention of any sage by name, but say Joshua declared according to the word of Moses, who spoke according to the power.
Okay, so let's understand that this is trying to imagine how can you have a continuing faithful Jewish community that has been separated from the Jewish community for hundreds and hundreds of years by the time this story is being told. And of course, by the time this story is being told, Judaism is defined by certain historical moments, by certain holidays, and by a Talmud. Talmudic Judaism is the definition of how we celebrate, how we live our Jewish lives. But these Jews have no part in the creation of the Talmud. They never heard of the Talmud. They never heard of Purim, because Purim happened after they already were separated from the Jewish people. So they have the scroll of Lamentations because that was written by Jeremiah, but they don't even say that because they really actually weren't part of that story either. So we have this very, kind of mind-boggling idea of people who are connected and are kith and kin of the Jewish people. They have none of our history, none of our subsequent stories. They only have the Bible itself. So their Talmud, there are no sages because they left the historical experience of the Jewish people before the sages ever came into existence. So what they have is only from Joshua, the word of Moses, who spoke according to the power. The power here is a translation of Mipi HaGvura. Mipi HaGvura means from God, from the mighty God. So this is what they are limited to. Does this ring a bell with any other peoples, any other groups?
Somehow I'm thinking of the Crusades, but I can't put it together.
No. The Crusades are much after this group. The Crusades are the Christian campaigns that were to capture the Holy Land, and there were Jewish communities that were very well versed in the Talmud and very well versed in Jewish life, and they were decimated by the Crusades. But that's the community that these stories are being told in. This is we are the followers of those communities, the Ashkenaz communities or the communities in the Middle East. These people, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, are peoples who were separated from us hundreds and hundreds of years earlier, and yet they maintain their Jewish identity. The echo that I'm thinking of is the Ethiopian Jews.
The North Africans.
I was just thinking of that.
Not the North Africans. The Ethiopians aren't North Africa, but
that's right. That's just yeah, right. Just plain
they're below Egypt. So, but they have a tradition that they come from the union of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So when they actually went back to Ethiopia with the Queen of Sheba, they followed their own Jewish traditions, but those Jewish traditions predate the destruction of the temple, the rise of the rabbis, the Talmud. So their traditions are very different, and their biblical heritage is very different, and their language is very different. They have this language called Gez, and they have kesim. That's their kind of priestly sages who run the community, or at least until they were finally rescued and brought to the land of Israel. But that's what's happening, throughout this last generation, the rescue of those Jews, and their restoration to the people of Israel in general. It's on the one hand a big miracle.
That's controversial.
But and controversial. Are they really Jews? Do we really want to accept them? But also, even if you accept them, how do they integrate into a Jewish culture which is totally different than their own?
Not easily.
That's for sure.
Rabbi,
And one second. And what do you do with their leaders? Are they treated with respect? Every immigrant situation always has the problem of the elderly or the parental generation that comes, finds it hard to get used to things, doesn't learn the language that well. And then the kids start getting assimilated into the culture. They look at their parents are idiots, their parents are failures. And of course they know so much better than their parents. And then the whole chain of tradition and the family structure gets stressed. So here we have a fantasy again of these Jews that are holding on. But on the other hand, the way that they live their Jewish lives is completely different than the Jewish lives of the people who are listening to the story. Who wanted to say something?
I wanted to ask.
Yeah, Josie.
Is the reference to this Cush, isn't that referring to Ethiopia?
Yes, that's the land of Cush is understood traditionally to be Ethiopia. That's right. And in Moses is so spoken about that Isha Kushit Lakach. He took a woman from the land of Cush. When they complained that he had a wife. So was it Zipporah? Was it a different wife? This is the Cushite wife that he had. So Cush is, but again, people in these stories are not that great at geography. So, exotic, right, and me too. So, exotic lands get names from the Bible, and it's not always necessarily clear. Are we really talking about north, south, east, west? No, it's hard to tell. Okay, here we go.
And every violent man among them is devoted to war, and they never cease from their craft, these engaging in Torah and these in warfare among all the 4 tribes. When they set out for battle, they do not set out in mixed companies, for they're given 3 months. The warriors of dawn follow their war on their horses, from which they do not descend all week long. But on the Sabbath eve, they descend wherever they may be, while their horses remain fully caparisoned, bearing their arms. And if no foe comes against them, they celebrate the Sabbath according to the law. But if their foes swoop down on them, they set out with all their weapons and slay many among them in accordance with the power of the name that is over them. And among them are warriors of the sons of Samson, who are the children of Delilah. And they run ahead to war, and the least of them can pursue a vast number of the foe. And when one of them raises his voice, it sounds like a mighty shouting, like the lion roaring, for he cries in a loud voice, "Victory is the Lord's, and your valor rests on your people of the tribes of Jeshurun. Salah."
Right. So let me just say that this discussion about the Sabbath is also of interest. This was a big question in Jewish early Jewish history. The Sabbath as a sacred day, as a day of rest. So we think about it about not going to business, God not doing all kinds of other kinds of work. What about war? So we have a big controversy at the time of Hanukkah, the time of the Hasmoneans, the time of the Maccabees. And very pious Jews who were involved in the fight against the Greeks believed that the Sabbath day is so holy that you can't fight on the Sabbath day. That would be a desecration. The Sabbath day is supposed to be a day literally of rest and tranquility, and any violence on the Shabbos would be completely tearing apart its holiness. The Greeks figured this out, and as a result, they were successful in conquering different Jewish groups and towns, because all they did was wait until Shabbos, and then they would attack on Shabbos, and none of the Jews would fight back. So what happened was that's one of the big changes that the Maccabees introduced, where they said, wait a second, if we don't fight on Shabbat today, there won't be anybody to keep Shabbat tomorrow. So Chalel alav Shabbat achat, kidei sheyishmor Shabbatot harbei. We'll have to desecrate this one Shabbat so that we'll be able to keep Shabbat, many other Shabbats in the future. So that was actually one of the beginnings of recording a kind of a Talmudic discussion about how do you balance these different kinds of questions. So that was in the 2nd century BCE. But these tribes, of course, separated from the Jewish community hundreds of years before that. So we have this interesting discussion here about, well, if they don't attack us, we're not going to attack them. But if they attack us, we will attack them. So
Is that the rationale for going, bearing arms during the Yom Kippur War when we were attacked on?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, here we go.
After the destruction of the first temple, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher came to Dan. For in the beginning, they used to live with Issachar in their cities, and they used to quarrel with them, since they said to them, "You are the sons of maidservants." Now, since they feared that war might break out between them, they set out and traveled till they reached Dan and became 4 tribes in a single place.
So this is a bookend to the way we began at the beginning of this story. The question of civil war between Jews versus fighting outside of the Jewish people. So Dan refused to fight with the other Israelites when Yeravam wanted to create a civil war. So they ran away. After the destruction of the first temple, according to this way of reading, these 3 tribes go running away. Why? Because the tribe of Issachar, which they lived with, was persecuting them. They looked down on them because they decide you're 2nd-class citizens. You're not really the sons of Rachel and Leah. You're the sons of the maidservants. So you're 2nd-class tribes. So they, in order not to actually fight for their rights against the other Israelites, they ran away and they joined Dan. Right? So this is a kind of a little bit of a hidden, not hidden, or a subtle critique of Jewish prejudice within the community, about people looking down and not getting along with each other, and yet they have this very awesome, fierce ability to do war, but they are really, very careful not to use it against their own brothers and sisters, no matter how badly they're treated. Okay, and this is the last little section here.
And those 4 tribes, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, remain with their cattle on the bank of the river Sambatyon, to shear their Sambatyon, to shear their flocks, for it is a flat, level land and clean, where neither thorn nor green stuff grows. And when they see the tribe of Moses, they gather and stand on the bank of the river, and they shout, "Brothers of the tribe of Jeshurun," and they greet each other in peace.
So this is their yearning to join with their people. Here we don't have the full description, but other places, the Sambatyon River, which of course is a legendary river. There is no identifiable Sambatyon River. But the Sambatyon River was a river that was described as being a river that was turbulent and had such, rapids and such, really violent kinds of flowing water that, the rocks from the riverbed were constantly being hurled up into the air, and it was impossible to cross the river. And that's what stuck the 4 tribes on the other side. Some stories it's all 10 tribes. are on the other side of the river Sambatyon, and they wish that they could, get across the river, but it's impossible to cross the river. But when they see another Jew on the other side of the river, they're so happy and they so want to greet them. But the Sambatyon has its name Sambatyon because of the word Shabbat, and miraculously, the waters of the Sambatyon River settle down on Shabbat. So on Shabbat, the river keeps Shabbat, and the river is not violent, and the river is not, in turmoil on Shabbat. But there's only one problem: you're not allowed to cross a river on Shabbat. So therefore, one way or the other, coming and going, the tribes on the other side of that river are stuck there, yearning to rejoin their people. And one day when the Messiah comes, then the Messiah will be able to quiet the river and bring everybody back together again, and we'll all be one united people once more, and we'll all be happy. That's the legend. Any comments?
I found it interesting where the 4 tribes, each one waged war for 3 months and then came back. It reminded me about where our troops are deployed to either Afghanistan or Iraq. It's like you do your duty, you come back, and then you have to go back again. It was like they were deployed.
Right.
It's an interesting concept of what happened then and how we've interpreted and how we do things now.
Right. Okay. So as I was giving a little bit of a kind of a commentary throughout, what does this say, not about the tribes in that are being depicted in this legend? What does this story tell us about the people who are listening to the story? They're the people who are actually telling the story. Our community that tells this story to itself about these far off cousins of ours that one day we'll be reunited with. What does this kind of say about the Jewish community that we're part of, that we continue to be connected to? What does it say about what they were thinking about, what they were concerned with or hoping for or afraid of? Yeah, Josie.
Well, I'm thinking that this is a good story from modern Israeli times, that at the founding of the state, the idea of a pious Jew who only prayed and was always a victim had to be overcome in order to create a state, and that perhaps these kind of people were held up as heroes to say, if we have to fight, we're going to fight.
Right. So
I'm
that's
an old Zionist, so
right. And the macho picture of the Jew was, in contrast to the ghetto Jew, the Nebuch, the Shlemiel, the Shlemazel, right? All of those Jews that can't eat a living, all of the people that we've read about in other stories, like in Shalom Aleichem, and those kinds of stories. These guys have muscles and they're fearless, what?
They won't fight fellow Jews.
But they won't fight fellow Jews, right?
I like that story.
Right. Anybody else?
In Israel today, there is mandatory army military service, both for male and female. But there are Orthodox.
Right, yeah.
But there are Orthodox who can be excused, and I don't remember exactly why. Is it because they're pacifists, or there are other religious reasons that they can not do their military service? I'm a little confused on that.
So the Orthodox community is split. There are many Orthodox Jews that join the army and participate very, very actively in the army. In fact, there's a certain bit of a concern that they are becoming more and more powerful within the army, because the religious community in Israel is has become very right-wing. But there are a number of issues that the ultra-Orthodox community have brought up to resist joining the army. First of all, they don't like a co-ed army. They are against women fighting in the army, period. So they think that the idea that there are women in the army is, first of all, itself a travesty. Second of all, it could lead to mixed dancing. So they think that it's morally dangerous to have men and women in an army situation where the controls over one's passions are loosened to a significant extent, because basically, so why should I worry about tonight when tomorrow I'm going to die? So they don't believe in the moral probity of the soldiers. And number three, they don't want to fight. They're chicken. And they say, no, we study Torah, so we're the ones that stay home, and we guarantee that God will be on our side, and we shouldn't have to go fight at all. So they refuse to fight, and this causes no end of resentment and strife within Israeli society. And that's, of course, one of the things that is constantly getting the Israeli political system in trouble. We've had 4 elections in 2 years, partly because the society is split between whether or not they should force the ultra-Orthodox to have to be part of the army or not. The ultra-Orthodox parties refuse to do that, and the ultra-Orthodox parties have enough political power so that they can stop a coalition, because they won't join a coalition that will be in favor of passing a law that says they have to join the army. So it's a very painful situation, and everybody pays the price. The whole society is put into paralysis. I mean, for years now, the Israeli society hasn't had a functioning government. They've had these temporary governments because they, like I said, 4 elections in 2 years, because none of the governments have been able to establish themselves as a functioning government. And the blackmail of the ultra-Orthodox parties to, if you want my vote for this or for that, then give us another few million shekels, give us another subsidy, give us another exemption. And it just eats up the sense of unity and morale in the country. And that was part of what was going on also with abiding by COVID regulations. Since the ultra-Orthodox community basically lives as a community, that abides by its own laws and doesn't respect the laws of the state. So when it came to listening to rules about quarantine and about distancing and about masks and so on, they didn't listen to that either. And then everybody else goes, so what? So the police are going to fine me for not wearing a mask, but they're not going to make an ultra-Orthodox person wear a mask? Forget it. So, there's a cynicism and there's a demoralization about the fabric of society that has been continuously being, getting worse and worse in Israel. And that also fuels the right-wing shift that happens in the country, because that feeds the idea of, hey, we have to watch out for ourselves, and we have to just not worry about being nice to everybody else. So it's it becomes a very besieged kind of a mentality, and it ends up being a catch-22. I mean, there are talks now. Some analysts say this election also will not bring up a functioning government, and we're going to have to get a 5th election. So because we're really in a stalemate. There are different things that the Israeli society wants. There isn't enough of a critical mass to tilt the scales for one kind of decision or another. Everybody's caught like a deer in the headlights. So that's the problem that's going on today. Now, the story, just to bring it back to our story, the story tries to have it, like I said, have it both ways. Have the matzah and eat it too, because they wanted to have the macho fighters, but the sages. And everybody is, loyal to God, and everybody's doing this on behalf of God. And there's, this sense of Jewish unity. And but they have a sense of Jewish unity. Meanwhile, there are other forces mentioned in the stories that say, wipe them out. Are you kidding? We want to have a civil war here. We don't like those people. Get rid of them. And these tribes, which, is it a coincidence, actually don't exist. Those are the tribes that refuse to fight with other Jews. All right. So just by contrast, flip it around. That means that the Jews that do exist are happy to fight with each other all the time. Right. And that's unfortunately our sad reality. Yeah, Meryl.
I saw this, getting back to the story, as kind of a dream for a peaceful unity amongst all of the various peoples, different views, but ultimately joining together. And, we can think about that today in many different ways. And then I just wanted to say one thing about, why behave, because, or the mixed dancing. I have a friend who was an army lawyer, and she was stationed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and her husband was also
American Army.
American Army, yes. This is an American. They're both American, and longtime Army people, 25 years, and they were stationed over in Iraq and Afghanistan at different times, and she told me the same thing, and she actually wrote a little bit of an Amazon published book about it. What goes on, because tomorrow we may die, it's really true. Things were crazy over there. It didn't matter whether someone was married or engaged or anything, had kids at home, not everybody's spouse was with them. They're over there and in war, in combat. And that's a very real feeling amongst, or it could happen more than mixed dancing.
Right. No, it's definitely, that's one of the tragedies of Israel, is that they have not yet known a generation of peace. Right. Every young person, except the ultra-Orthodox, like I said, every young person in Israel is put into the crucible of violence and all of the morally corrosive forces that are involved in that. Right. They haven't had a break. There's no, elective about this, enlist or don't enlist. No, this is everybody. Just push through this again and again and again. Yeah. All right. So this was a happy story to have during Chol HaMoed. Unless there's somebody else has something else to bring up, I'm going to call it a day. I want to wish everybody a sweet continuation of Pesach through this weekend. And looking forward to seeing you next week, right?
Right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Hag Sameach. Thank you.
Have a good
Rabbi.
week. Thank you. Hag Sameach.
Hag
Hag
Sameach.
Sameach.